All right, so today's video is for the Triumph folks who, like myself, have been kind of excited lately that we've got TuneECU dropped a base file for the 765, the new 2020 Street Triple RS. So we can now tune it. Wasn't an option before, had to go with Power Commander and stuff like that. And I'm going to go through, I've done a couple quick videos before, but I'm going to go into a little more detail on this and kind of give you my thoughts of what I've done and why I may not use TuneECU for this in the future. So there's kind of some pros and cons. So what I'm doing now is I'm using this through my desktop PC because it's easier for me to take a video of a 42-inch screen. So I'm using BlueStacks, which is an Android emulator that I've used before. And that'll allow me to use a mouse and keyboard and do a better video because if you're trying to see it on my phone, plus I'd have to use my phone to do the recording of itself, and haven't quite figured out how to do that and make it look nice. So we're going to do it this way. So I've loaded TuneECU into BlueStacks. Now, I wouldn't use this if you had a laptop and you want to use BlueStacks. I recommend using something like that to be able to come in and edit the tables and modify things because it's a bigger screen. You're not trying to work with something on a little tiny cell phone where those cells are like, the size of a poppy seed. But I wouldn't try talking to your ECU through BlueStacks through the Android emulator. I feel like there's just too much chances for something to go wrong during the flash, and you can completely, brick your ECU. So don't even try it. But use this to make your map, and then shoot it over to your phone and use your Android phone to push the map. So what we're going to do is not about flashing the ECU, talking about how to actually map this thing and why I'm probably going to go back to a Power Commander. So there's back and forth on, ECU programming, tuning through an ECU is better. It's more direct. There's not a piggyback system. It gets better results. You don't have extra wires. There's less things to go wrong. And I've used Power Commander since the PC3, the PCV for years on a multitude of bikes. I've never had an issue. Doesn't mean there can't be an issue, but I've never had an issue with a Power Commander. They've always worked. There's no moving parts. They typically last many years. But I understand the concept of wanting to do it directly through the ECU. Here's the problem with it. One, every time you flash your ECU, you run the risk of bricking it. Incoming call, something happens, your phone reboots, something happens, breaks the Bluetooth connection. You could conceivably fuck up your ECU. Now, it doesn't happen often, just like, Power Commanders don't tend to break very often, but it is a risk every time you write to the ECU. Additionally, the dealer, when they plug it in, they're going to be able to see how many times your ECU's been written to. And we'll go into that because every time you want to tune this, it's not as simple as you'd like it to be. So the way this works is you have fuel tables. There's fuel for cylinder 1. You scroll down, you got fuel for 2, fuel for cylinder 3. The L tables, I've had people explain to me, I'm not sure exactly what those do. There's your ignition tables. They're different by different gear. In this case, they're actually all the same except for neutral. ETV, those are your throttle maps. So it takes your throttle position sensor and determines, all right, you gave it 100% throttle at a given RPM range. How much are we going to actually open up the throttle bodies, and how much throttle are we going to give you? So you'll notice here it says 100% at the 100% column, but then it cuts back. And that's because this is the rain map. This is the rain engine mode. There's road, there's sport, where you can see you're giving it full power. Let's see. Air fuel, these are targets, and these were originally like 14.5s in this area, but I don't know how much changing this actually makes a difference. I'm wondering if there's someone who knows more about this than I know what I think it should do, but that doesn't always translate to what it actually does. So we'll just ignore that for now. When it comes to tuning this, it's similar in a way to a Power Commander in that, let's get back up to our F1 table, in that you have RPM ranges, you have throttle positions, and then it's a simple matrix. At 41.7% throttle at 4,500 RPMs, this is how much fuel we're giving it. Now, I don't know what that unit of measurement means. It means something to the ECU. We're not really so much concerned with that so much as when you want to make a change, you're going to add in based on a percentage. And where you add to that is if you scroll over one to the left from the F1, you've got your trim maps. Make sure that when you make changes, unless you're doing per cylinder tuning, which you'd probably need an O2 bung on each header pipe to get readings from each. Maybe for racing applications, you would do that. Most people for the street with a slip-on or even a full system are not. Make sure that F-trim global is checked. And that way you make trim value changes here based on what you're reading on the dyno, and then you're going to commit them to your map. You want to make sure it applies it to all cylinders and not just one of them. So you have one running properly and two that are not. So make sure that that's checked. By default it is, but just make sure you don't uncheck it. So you load up the base map for your bike. In this case, I've got 31044, which is the US based and, well, really North America, US and Canada for the 2020 Street Triple RS 765. So I've got my maps over here for the fuel. And what you do is you get on the dyno, you have a good operator, they plug into the O2 bung or maybe put a sniffer down the tailpipe, but they're going to run it on the dyno and they're going to see what the air fuel ratio at each of these corresponding cells. So when you're at 2400 RPM and you give it 100% throttle, either they do it in steps depending on the type of dyno, or they may do a slow sweep through the gears, through that rev range. And so they'll say, okay, it's really lean here, it's a little rich there, and so you're going to come in here and put in adjustments just like you would on a power commander. So in this respect, they're the same. Here's where this becomes a pain in the ass, and I'd almost rather just spend the extra $350 and install a power commander, is that this is a very slow task. You're going to be running through these values, and you're basically guessing. You're going to say, all right, it looks really lean here, so I want to add, I don't know, I feel like 18, 15%, something like that in that particular cell. And the next one, it wasn't as lean, so we're only going to add 10%. And you simply do that by going to Table, Modify, and now I can come in here and I can select that, and I can add or subtract fuel based on what I think it needs. Or I can say, you know what, we're down in the cruising range here, and the whole area is really it's equally kind of lean. It's running around 15, air fuel ratio, 14.9 something. And so I want to highlight that whole area, and let's go ahead and, add a certain percentage. Let's add 20% or, whatever. And so you can make all these changes. The problem here is when you do it in a power commander, when you got the Tuning Link software, the operator sets it and says, all right, here's where red line is, here's the starting RPM, and we're going to do 100% throttle. And you do it, and it runs up through there, it analyzes the gas, makes its best corrections, and instantly just the operator literally goes, enter, and just accepts the values, and it enters the values, and it's instantly sent to the power commander. And then they'll run it again and go, all right, that got us really close, but we still need to add another 3% right here. Hit enter, accept it, run it again. You can go through and do the whole damn map in like 20 to 30 minutes. And that's including setting a baseline, because there's no one air fuel ratio that makes, perfect power everywhere. It's going to vary from bike to bike. And your motor might be a little happier up here and make a little bit better power, a little bit lean. Over here, it might make a little bit more power if it's running slightly rich. So you might be targeting 13.8 up here, run a little lean. Sometimes they say a little lean is mean. But down here, it likes to be fattened up a little bit. So your dyno operator will typically say, all right, we're gonna start with 13.2. Excuse me, or 13.4, just to get a baseline so we know we're going to go for like what's considered the target stoichiometric value that the motor is going to be happy at. It's in that range where the AFR is pretty much perfect, but your motor might like it a little more or less in certain areas, and that's where the dyno operator will set that baseline, get all these values to where that motor is consistent, and then he may go in there and hunt for power a little bit and say, all right, let's just lean it up a little bit up here at the top at the end and see if we pick up another 1.5 horsepower. Oh, we lost about 1.5. Let's go the other direction. Let's add 2% and see where it likes it. So you set that baseline, and then you can kind of go in and hunt for power in the areas where it matters. You're probably not as concerned down here at your lower throttle openings. This is kind of where you're cruising. You're accelerating at a moderate pace. Once you give it full gas, that's where you want to kind of really optimize it for max power. And there's no magic number. It's whatever your motor wants. So they'll have to play around with that. The problem with this when you're using TuneECU is the process friggin' takes forever, because you come in here, you're going to make these changes. It doesn't, you're making the changes in the software. You still have to push this to the ECU. So let's just say I'd made a bunch of tweaks here on the 100%. Then I have to go over and connect to the ECU. Then I have to go and reprogram. That is a 15 to 18 minute process every time you send an adjustment. Even if I just went and changed one cell. It's not, at least on this bike, it does not seem like the old days where the first time, if you're using a laptop with the Windows software and you have a hard cable going into the diagnostic port. The first time you write that map, it kind of takes forever, but then every time you would make a change, it's only sending that bit that's the change. And so that process could be much quicker. It doesn't seem to work that way here on this new one. Just to go in and do kind of a, let's get it to where the motor's happy with the Kropovich race slip-on and the BMC filter. It was running really, really lean down low, and actually up top was okay, but we did a lot of cleanup in this area, and I'll show you how to do a map compare, and you can see the changes we made to say, okay, this is good enough for now. And I had to go and fill in a couple flat spots yesterday where I felt down here in this range. It would pull strong because we added fuel here, but we didn't right in here. And you'd feel the torque drop off and then come back on at 7,000. So I went and added more fuel. But again, going and making it's easy to make the changes here. But then when you want to push them to the ECU, 15 to 18 minutes. So if you had to do that 8 times, you may spend an hour or two in your dyno room just waiting on the file to update. Whereas with the Power Commander, you'd already be done in 2 hours down the road. That's the problem I have with this. And I think when I do get a set of Spark or SC Project race headers, I'm going to put the base map back in here, just go right to the stock map, and we're going to put a Power Commander in it, and we're just going to spend 45 minutes, powering through these. But even then, here's the caveat. With TuneECU, normally you would go in here and you'd say, all right, parameters. And down here, there'd be a button that says devices. And under that, typically, there would be SAI, and there would be a button for O2 sensors. In fact, let's go load a different map. And let's see. So there's my map. We made a full custom map for my Street Cup with ignition changes and no O2 sensor. So let's go load that up. If I go in here to parameters, see how I can also change the cooling temperature fan. So I wanted it to come on a little early. So in Atlanta traffic, why wait till the motor gets super, super hot and then try to cool it down? Let's have the fan come on a little earlier. But see how there's a devices button? When I click on that, it's no longer checked. I was able to disable the O2 sensors so that I could just go ahead and tune it. And here's why. Let's go back to my other map here. So let's go back to open. Let's go to my Kropovich tune. With the O2 sensor in place, the bike is, there's an open loop and closed loop section of your map. So I'm just going to go to modified tables for a moment so I can just select this. Basically, from everything that I can find, I may be off by a little bit of RPM or throttle position, but basically, this section here, up to about 20% throttle and up to 5,500 RPMs. This area here is considered the closed loop area. You can't tune here. I can put in trim values and I can send them to the ECU, but with that lambda sensor intact, the ECU, excuse me, is going to read those readings if I'm cruising around in this area and go, oh, no, that's way too rich. We're going to lean that all out. It's going to undo all the changes. We've done this. We've watched it on the dyno. We put the changes in. It has a good air-fuel ratio. We do a couple runs, and every time you do a run, it gets leaner and leaner, and it takes you right back to where the motor wants. And that is because with Euro 5 regulations, this is the area where they do most of their emissions testing in. It's all in this basic area. Maybe it extends a little over here or a little up here, but it's basically this bottom quarter of the map. You really can't make any changes there until you can disable the O2 sensors. They could on this bike, I think. I have not heard it confirmed, but I think that the authors of TuneECU don't want to do that anymore. The reason is, if you remember, DynoJet got sued by the state of California for like $8 million for selling O2 eliminators, which is just a resistor that you put on the wiring for the O2 sensor so that it just sees a constant reading. And so you can make changes in this area, and the ECU is none the wiser. It doesn't know that you've made changes because it's not getting a different signal. It's always the same signal coming from the resistors. So it just says, oh, everything's fine. I don't need to make any changes. Well, I have a feeling they're very hesitant to do that with the way they've been cracking down on these companies for bypassing emissions and things like that. So you can't really tune down here. So you may still get some lean surging. Now, the good news is down here at very little throttle openings, the motor's not under load. You're not trying to go fast. So having a air-fuel ratio of like 14.5 or 14.8, while nowhere optimal, you're really not going to do much damage to the motor. It would have to be like crazy lean, like 16 or something horrendous. And so I'm hoping at some point we find a way to do this. I'm told even though you can't do it in TuneECU, even if you add O2 eliminators to it, this new ECU is smart. Triumph checks for that. And so after a certain period of time, people had good results when they mapped down here, but after about a month, it started getting worse and worse, but only in this section, not out here. This was fine. And so what they think is happening is that when the new ECU looks to see if there's a constant resistor on there and it never changes, it goes, you know what, something's up. Let's start making changes, and it starts undoing things. So this area you can't tune around, whether you have a power commander or not, until we have a way to effectively disable the ECU, O2 sensors so that the ECU doesn't try to make corrections. You're going to live and play up here. So over 5,500 RPMs you can tune, and above 20% throttle. So, and granted, this is where you want to do most of your power, because this is your mid-range, this is your high end, this is where your high throttle positions are. So this is where you're under power, you're under load, you're trying to accelerate. And there, if you are too lean, you may get detonation and things, and you can do damage to your motor, as well as have, shit performance. So this is the area you want to tune in, regardless of what method you're using, whether it's TuneECU or the Power Commander. The Power Commander is going to be faster. It really is. We spent like 4.5 hours in the dyno room, and a third of that to almost a half of that was waiting on the damn ECU to update because of that 15 to 18 minute process. Every time we do sweeps, we make some adjustments. You'd want to test those to make sure, was that enough? Was it too much? Do we need to back off a little? Do we need to add more? You can't test that until you push it to the ECU. And that takes 18 minutes every time. And look at all the areas you've got to do here. Now, the one thing you could do to speed it up is to go through every section and make your best guesses at what these trims values should be, and then send it all at once, and then go back and test them all. And then if you have to make adjustments, so maybe you could cut down on it a little bit, but it's still going to take you 3-4 times longer than a Power Commander. So, no offense to the guys at TuneECU. I wish there was a way to. I'm glad that this is out there. It was money well spent. And there's other things that you can use this for, like clearing diagnostic codes and checking things and helping sync your throttle bodies. And there's a lot of value here. Trust me. Spend the $15 whether you got a freaking Power Commander or not. Give the guys some money. They do some good work here. But unfortunately, it does take a while to be able to go ahead and tune this. So real quick now, last thing we'll wrap up here is, what changes did we make? So let's compare the map I made on the dyno from the stock map. So there's a compare feature. You go in, you open up and you load. Let's see, I want to open the Akrapovich tune. Then you go to compare. And you say, I want to compare it to the base map, which is 31044. So you can see every box where there is a dot, that is an area where we changed fuel. So we added a bunch of fuel here, and you'll be able to see how much when I click on this in a moment. But up here, it was actually running pretty good with the acro. And I do have the DB killer in because it's just way too loud without it. And it actually was a little bit too open. And even with tuning, we lost a little torque down here. So the extra horsepower up top that we would gain by removing the DB killer wasn't worth losing 4 down here. So it sounds brilliant the way it is. So these are all the areas that we made changes. Now, once I don't have them in the trim table anymore because I hit commit and it moved it into the map. But if I hit a button and hold it, you can see all the cells that changed, and you can see what the old value was. So let's look at this one right here, 3031. It's now 3131. Where this one here says 404, originally it was 3202. It's now 4034. I mean, we added like 20 or something, 22%. It was really, really lean in these areas. That's where I had that torque dip, and that seems to have fixed it. Now it pulls strong and clean. It would pull strong here, and then we didn't add any fuel here, so it would kind of drip a little bit and then pick back up. So we added in some fuel here. But you can see basically, we made some significant changes. There's areas in here we've added anywhere from 5% up to, in some areas, 25% fuel. We made some very significant changes in this area. It was running crazy lean there, so we had to dump a bunch of fuel into these areas. And now it picks up a lot stronger. When I'm in first gear rolling along at only like 4,500, 5,000 RPMs, if I just blip it to like 4,000 RPM, like a 40% throttle, it starts picking the front end up now in first. not even going full gas or bouncing it or rolling off and on. Like literally, you could just be it rolling along at like 5,000 RPMs, 4,500 or something. And if you just crack it to like 40 or 60%, like right in this range, it starts lifting the front end up and just starts power wheeling on its own. Whereas before you had to almost kind of like give it 80 or 100% and it would, want to start picking the front end up around 5 or 6. So it definitely made a difference in here. So this is how you tune it. You need a dyno. You need someone who knows what they're doing. You need someone in an Android phone. You need the Bluetooth connector. You need your base map loaded in there. And then you basically come over here, you swipe left and start putting in your trim values to say, I want to take out 3% here, add 5% there, based on what the dyno is reading. And then you're going to have to push it all to ECU, and then you're going to have to test it. It's a laborious process. It will work. It's not like this doesn't work and that's why you need a power commander. There's nothing wrong with the software. It's just it takes a lot freaking longer. And if you got someone who's got a DynoJet 250i and the Tuning Link software and you throw a power commander in there, it almost can go on freaking autopilot. He can sit there and go 80% throttle and it goes up, makes the suggestions, instantly sends it to the power commander, do it again and test it till it's perfect, move to the next, move to the next. And you can knock this out in no time in a power commander. And so if you're paying for dyno time by the hour, you may think you're saving money by going with TuneECU and not having to pay the $325 or whatever a power commander goes for these days. But you may end up spending more in an hourly rate. And then if you want to make changes in the future, you had a half system, now you have a full system, you throw in velocity stacks, you want to do something else. Do you want to go through this all again? I don't know. I'm leaning towards doing the power commander because I don't want to take 4 hours to tune the thing next time. I want to drive it in, let's hook it up, and in half an hour and 40 minutes, I'm out on my way with new power, So that's what we've got. That's my recommendation. This is how you use the system. I'm not hooked up to an ECU now, so I can't hit connect. There's a button to hit reprogram. I've actually got a video already up for that shows you live. I'm actually going in and doing it. But that's all I can think of for now. So hopefully this will help some folks trying to make the decision. Is it worth it? Depends. If you just need a quick tweak here because you got maybe a slip-on, or even you just got the aero exhaust, and if you just want to go in and make a tweak or something, yeah, you don't need to spend for a power commander, and you can come in here and do those changes. And at some point, hopefully, be able to disable the O2 sensors and really map this properly. But you're going to need to do that again, disable O2 whether you got the power commander or not. So hopefully this will help you folks. If not, give me any questions. If I need to show something else, I can.